Hello everyone, Rurikhan here coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Elden Ring. Now recently a number of media outlets as well as content creators were given exclusive access to a 16-minute gameplay presentation of Elden Ring. And as you can imagine, by watching 16 minutes of raw gameplay of this game, that is going to provide us with quite a bit of new information. Unfortunately, I was not among the people who got to watch these 16 minutes of gameplay, so I was left to scour the internet searching for anything and everything that I could find about this presentation and what I could extrapolate in terms of systems that we've seen in Souls games before, as well as systems that are brand new to Elden Ring. And some of you guys might be wondering, okay, so after you researched all this information, are you more excited about the game, less excited about the game? What's the deal? And I'm at this point the most excited I've ever been to actually play Elden Ring. That's not to say that everything is perfect. There are a couple of points that were revealed that I was not particularly happy about. For those of you that are familiar with the information, I can just I'm not going to blue ball you. I'm going to tell you those points are the way that they're planning on handling FP, which is basically the mana system for Elden Ring, as well as the way they're planning on handling PvP. And I'm going to go into more in depth as to why I don't like the way that they're doing these systems. That's not to say that this is like a big deal or it can't be changed or I can't change my mind once I actually play the game. It's just from previous experience with Souls games, I'm a little bit more negative in regards to those systems. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of things, I would also like to give a brief intro as to what is Elden Ring. For those of you that may not be aware, may not know what it's all about, may not know why you should care, Elden Ring is going to be the next From Software game. And I've always said that From Software is at their best when they're working on new IP. This is why I feel like Demon Souls was amazing, why Dark Souls was amazing, Bloodborne was amazing, and Sekiro was amazing. That's not to say that Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 are not good. I still think those are very good games, but that is to say that, again, to emphasize, From Software is always at their best when they're working on something brand new. Again, this is my opinion, feel free to disagree. But what is Elden Ring going to be like? Elden Ring is going to play much more like Dark Souls, so you'll be able to do character build, stuff like that. It's not going to be like a predetermined character like Sekiro, and you're going to be able to have a wide variety of builds. There is going to be PvP. There is going to be an open world, which is it's not really a first because a lot of the Souls games can be considered open world, but this time it feels like it's going to be a more traditional open world. Again, we're going to get into more detail. This is just like a brief intro. This game was developed in collaboration with George R. Martin, who is obviously the author of the A Song of Ice and Fire books, also, which is where the Game of Thrones TV show is based off of. That's not to say that he wrote the story. Basically, George R. R. Martin, from my understanding and the research that I've done, he provided the lore of the world in which Elden Ring takes place, and the story is actually written by the From Software team with a huge degree of oversight by, I'm not sure if oversight is the right word, but you guys get the idea. Hidetaka Miyazaki very much heavily involved. Okay, so that is kind of in a nutshell what you can expect. If you know about Dark Souls, you'll kind of know what to expect from Elden Ring. Now, let's dive into things. And one of the first questions some people might be asking is, how long is Elden Ring going to be? And we actually have an answer to that. Hidetaka Miyazaki told Games Radar that for the critical path of the game, and this is literally ignore every single side quest, assuming that you know the exact path that you're supposed to go on and you're still looking at cutscenes and stuff like that. He said it's about 30 hours for the critical path, which is pretty much in line with what you can expect from most Souls games if you're just going for the critical path. If you go off the beaten path, then you can extend that significantly. And I think that, the way that Souls games work with the replayability value that they have, I think most of us are going to see quite a bit more gameplay out of a game like Elden Ring. Now let's talk a little bit about story, because even though a lot of people don't really play Souls games for story, there are clearly a lot of people that love the lore of Souls games and the way in which the story is told. And I have two conflicting quotes here, which is interesting, but I'll give you guys my take after I tell these quotes. So the first quote comes to us from IGN, and they say, "In From Fashion, the story is told in fragments, and we haven't changed our principle of providing a world and narrative that the player can interpret from themselves." This is from Software's Yasuhiro Kitao on an IGN article. And then, in a Eurogamer article, Kitao also said, "We're often told that our games have stories that are difficult to understand. But this time, we feel that rather than focusing on just the world itself, the characters and the drama surrounding them will paint a clearer picture of the mainline story and help players become more immersed in the story than ever before." So, when you put these two things together, what do you get? In my opinion, we're looking at the storytelling style that we got in Sekiro. That is to say, if you want to get deep into the lore and you want to go look at like item descriptions and learn more and more about the game, you can. But if you want to just experience the game and get like the main plot of the game, you should be able to do so without necessarily going too off the beaten path, too out of your way. You should be able to have a basic understanding of the story, and then it's all about how deep do you want to go into the rabbit hole of this particular game. And let me tell you right now, I'm going to be watching every single Vati video that he puts out, dude, 100%. I'm going to go so deep into this rabbit hole, I'm never coming out, okay? So that's me. But, you know, to each their own, right? That's how it goes. Also, if ENB hasn't done videos in a while, I feel like, but like if ENB is also going to put out like lore videos, I'll watch those as well, like 100%, or a full ENB playthrough as well. That's also going to be awesome, which by the way, I'll talk about my own plans for coverage of Elden Ring at the end of this video. I want to stay a little bit more focused here. So that is what I can tell you about the story up until this point. I'm not going to be giving you story specifics because, you know, there's obviously a lot of parallels that you can draw to certain mythologies and stuff like that, but I want to keep this, when it comes to story, as spoiler-free as possible. So, first things first. What are you going to do the second you get into the game? You're going to create a character, because this is always like a thing in Souls games. Like whenever they put out a trailer, at least back in the day it used to be a thing, they would put out a trailer and people would be wondering, oh, but can I create a character? Is it going to be a pre-made character? What's the deal? I don't know why, but this question always seems to come up in most From Software games. And let me just tell you, okay, you can save this information for the future. Unless From Software specifically tells you that it's a predetermined protagonist like they did for Sekiro, you can assume that you're going to be able to create a character and customize it. And that is definitely going to be the case in Elden Ring. You can customize your player character, you can customize your build, you can focus on melee, you can use bows, you can do spell casting, or any combination of the three. Like you can probably do the usual stuff that we do with the spell swords, where you have the sword and then you apply an enchantment to it, it deals more damage. That kind of stuff is all going to work out depending on how well you optimize your stats and stuff like that. When it comes to the stats, you're going to have similar stats to Dark Souls. Now, Fextra Life pointed out a specific thing, which is strength and agility are going to influence your equipment load. As opposed to like in Dark Souls 1, you would have endurance. I don't remember what the stats were like in Dark Souls 3. It's been a while since I've played these games, okay? But strength and agility are going to influence your equipment load, and your equipment load is going to determine your roll speed and, you know, the usual stuff that we're used to from Souls games. Now, I want to point out that I'm not a huge fan of the agility implementation in Dark Souls 2, which was, if I remember correctly, pretty much a mandatory stat that... It was one of those stats that's like, put points here so that you don't suck. It's not even like put points here if you have build A or build B or build C. It's more like, no, you need to put this amount of points into this stat or you're going to suck. I hope that is not the case for agility coming back. You know, but this is just one man's opinion. You guys can let me know in the comment sections how you feel about that. But this was just to give you an idea that, yes, there is going to be character creation. There is going to be character customization. You're going to be able to swap your armor, swap your weapons, swap everything around, and do traditional Souls-like builds that are going to significantly change your playstyle, which, like I mentioned above, is going to provide you with a lot of replayability. Hey, this time I'm going to play a strength character. This time play a dexterity character. This time play a spellcasting character. Now I'm going to play with a bow. Now I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get this. As a matter of fact, this game is even going to give you more build variety than you've ever seen before in a Souls game. And I'll explain why in just a couple of minutes. Because now I want to talk a little bit about the world and checkpoints. So, the world of Elden Ring is going to take place in an open area that is called the Lands Between. This is the overworld, and there's reports that some people saw that below this map there's like some subterranean labyrinth. There's people already extrapolating, oh, is it going to be like the Bloodborne one? We don't actually know enough information to talk about that, so I'm not going to be talking too much about the subterranean labyrinth. Just know that there is something there, and we don't know exactly what that is going to be. But so you have this thing called the Lands Between. It's an open world. It's not going to be like a Ubisoft open world with, oh, here's the camp that you got to go kill, and then you take over this camp, and then you go get this tower, and it reveals more. It's nothing like that, okay? It's going to be an open world more in line with what you've come to expect about Dark Souls. It's going to be about you exploring and discovering things along the way. Now, this open world is going to feature things like dungeons, ruins, enemy camps, and, you know, all kinds of random encounters that you'll be able to do throughout the world. And I would like to first talk a little bit about dungeons, which, according to Fextra Life, these are going to be locations that are going to have traps, monsters, and bosses that can potentially drop equipment or skills. Some of you guys are like, skills? If you guys haven't been looking into Elden Ring, you might not be aware of the fact that there are skills in Elden Ring, and these are skills that you'll be able to equip on different weapons, but we'll get deeper into skills later in the video. Just be aware that these are simple dungeons, like smaller dungeons, because there's different kinds of dungeons throughout the game. But besides dungeons, ruins, enemy camps, there's also these monsters called field bosses. And I say monsters, maybe some of them can be humanoid. You guys get the idea. There's these enemies called field bosses, and these are mini bosses spread throughout the open world. They give an example about how there's this dragon that they fight during the gameplay presentation that they had. And this dragon just like swoops down, destroys a bunch of hollow dudes. Not really hollow, but like, you know, menial dudes that were there. And then you start fighting this dragon. We're going to get into a little bit more detail about this dragon fight, but just be aware that there are field bosses as well that you will get to fight. Some of the field bosses are going to leave behind Lost Grace checkpoints. And I will tell you what Lost Grace checkpoints are. But to give you a basic idea, these are essentially the bonfires of Elden Ring. Now, besides all of these activities that you'll be able to do out in the overworld is connected to 6 legacy dungeons. What are legacy dungeons? Okay, the way that I'm thinking about this from the information that I've seen is like, picture the hub that you have in Demon Souls, the Nexus. The Nexus is connected to 5 different archstones. Should have been 6, but the 6th one was broken. So the Nexus is connected to 5 different archstones. And when you go to one of these archstones, you get access to a large area, like you go to the Kingdom of Boletaria. You go to the Valley of Defilement. You go to all of these different places, right? And these are large, sprawling areas. That's the way that I look at it. You look as the Lands Between as a huge open world nexus, and then connected to it, there's going to be the 6 legacy dungeons, which I would expect to have similar dimension to like each of the archstones of Demon Souls. I could be a little bit wrong, maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into it, but that is the parallel that I would draw. There's a heavy focus on exploration and choice when it comes to these legacy dungeons, as well as even, you know, when you're exploring the overworld. And what do I mean by exploration and choice? They've given the example that they go to one of the legacy dungeons during the gameplay presentation, which is the Stormvale Castle. And there's an NPC that tells you, hey, you can go through the front gate, which is probably going to be hard, or there's a hole in the wall back there that you can kind of like sneak past dudes and you can avoid a lot of combat that way. It'll probably be easier to go through this hole in the wall. And so they show in that gameplay that you can choose. You can go through the front gate, and they go through the front gate, they get shot by a ballista, so they instantly change their mind and they take the back route. Now, there's an important thing here that I would like to bring up, which is I'm hoping that these are actually choices, as in depending on potentially the build that you have. Like, say you've built a little bit more tanky, there is the option of you actually brute forcing your way through that front door. I mean, obviously there's always going to be that option. It's just the matter of what is the level of skill that is going to require for you to just like tackle this challenge head on. I'm just hoping that there is an actual option there. And it's not something like, hey, if you go this way, you're probably just going to get completely wasted repeatedly and just have to bite your teeth or whatever. You know, I'm hoping that there's like an option there based around the build that you make, and you, the player, get to do that option. So it's like if you're more of a roguish type and you want to play more sneaky with a, you know, the more of a critical build, the dexterity build kind of, then sure, you can take that option. But if you're playing more of a strength build, more of a I want to take the challenge head on and I have plenty of health and stamina, that the front approach would also be a viable one. And even there should be advantages to both, right? So if you take the sneaky route and you happen to be a more tanky type character, maybe it would be harder for you to get around enemies because your armor is clanking and therefore you can't really sneak past things. Like, I'm hoping that they keep these things in mind. I think that would be a very interesting thing, because there is also stealth in the game, similar to the way that you can stealth in Sekiro. So, you know, they're kind of combining all of the best elements of each Souls game and Sekiro as well to kind of bring it all together into this huge open world game. So there's that. Then if you go through the sneaky route, they also say that you're able to use like sleeping arrows on a troll and you're able to bypass certain things, because taking that sneaky route actually gives you significant tactical advantage in regards to the challenges that you encounter further ahead, which is, you know, interesting. And we'll see how these choices play out in the actual final game. I just wanted to point out that I'm hoping that these are actually viable choices, and not just like, hey, if you go this way, it's going to be way harder. If you go this way, it's going to be like super easy, right? That's what I'm pointing out. Now, they've also pointed out pretty much most articles that I've seen that there's going to be more verticality in dungeons. For those of you that are not aware, there is a jump button in this game. And whenever you jump, you can also attack while you're in the air. You can, you know, do melee attacks, shoot a bow. Nobody's really mentioned casting from midair, which I'm not sure if that's going to be a thing, because casting obviously is a little bit different, but we'll see how that works out. There's also, like I said earlier, huge focus on exploration. And while we're talking about jump, I should also mention that your spirit steed can also jump, and this is going to be important for overworld exploration from what we can see in the trailers. Now, an important thing that we've never really seen, I guess we have seen it in Sekiro, is that there is a map in this game. The map shows you your current location, and you can place markers on it. And whenever you place markers on the map, the marked areas are going to show up as pillars of light in the overworld. And it's almost impossible not to draw comparisons to Breath of the Wild, although I wouldn't go as far as some articles that I've seen, which is like, they see this feature and the first thing that they say is Dark Souls is more like Breath of the Wild than you can imagine. And I was just like, really? You're going to make that your headline? Okay, man. It's like, I guess you got to get all of those keywords in there. Elden Ring is the Breath of the Wild of Dark Souls? I don't even know. Anyway, yes, you will be able to mark areas in the map, and those will show up as pillars of light. Vati Vidya also mentioned that there was a big ocean area in the map with like ships and stuff like that, and it's something that even seemed like a path. So there might be, at some point, you will be able to cross through this large ocean area into a different zone. Maybe you'll take a boat, maybe you'll swim. We don't exactly know what that is going to be like, but it is interesting. Now, you fill out this map with, I'm assuming with additional details, by discovering fragments of it out in the world. So I'm assuming even potentially some of those dungeons that we talked about before that have, not the legacy dungeons, the smaller dungeons, and maybe also in the legacy dungeons, obviously, that the bosses will be able to drop you pieces of the map, or maybe you'll find it in, certain chests or something like that. So that'll be interesting. Basically, it still gives you that Uncharted feeling. And when I say Uncharted, I'm not talking about the video game. I'm talking about the actual meaning of the word Uncharted territory. It gives you that feeling of exploration because you don't have the fragments at the start, so maybe you don't know all of the details out of the map, so it still gives you that Souls exploration feel, which I think is essential for a first-time Souls experience. And when you discover these fragments, maybe you'll be able to discover, oh, there's actually something here that I missed the first time that I came through, and that'll be cool. Oh yeah, an additional thing that I forgot to mention earlier, dungeons it was confirmed that they'll have illusory walls. I guess I just didn't really think that was that relevant because I kind of expected it to begin with. Now, another important thing to this map is that after you discover the Lost Grace checkpoints that I talked about a little bit earlier, we're going to get into more depth into these things. You'll be able to travel to them from anywhere. You don't have to be on another Lost Grace checkpoint. You'll be able to just I just want to go to this place, and you travel there, and boom. Now, an important detail is that this works while you're out in the overworld, not when you're inside a legacy dungeon. So legacy dungeons are going to work more like traditional Souls games from what I've seen from these articles, whereas, when you're out in the open world, you can just fast travel to anywhere you want. I'm assuming, and this is not confirmed in any of the articles that I've seen, but I'm assuming that once you fast travel, it's going to respawn the enemies, but maybe it won't, because, essentially, whenever you rest at a Lost Grace, enemies respawn just like a bonfire. According to Eurogamer, the world of Elden Ring feels more alive than is usually expected in traditional From Software games. I think they saw some cattle grazing and stuff like that, and, I guess they have to do that because if you just have a wide open area and it's got that desolate, lonely feeling of traditional Souls, it would just look like an empty spot of land, right? So they have to do something to make it feel more alive. So I'm curious to see how exactly it feels, though, because again, I might have a different opinion on that when the actual game comes out. So now let's talk a little bit more about these Lost Grace checkpoints that I've been talking about. Like I said, these are basically bonfires. When you rest in them, enemies respawn. You're going to replenish your healing charges, which I believe there's going to be something very similar to an Estus Flask. And whenever you are at one of these Lost Grace checkpoints, there's subtle rays of light from this grace pointing towards your main objective. So it's just a subtle guidance. It doesn't tell you, oh, you got to go this way. It doesn't have a GTA 5 GPS thing going on. Nothing like that. Just a subtle ray of light to kind of point you in a certain direction, which, to be honest, if you take into account that this is the first time that From Software is doing a large open world, right? They're probably trying to give you a little bit more guidance, especially for newcomers to the franchise not newcomers to the franchise, but newcomers to this genre that might not be familiar with how the game works. So veterans can still kind of just ignore this and explore whatever direction you feel like exploring, whereas new players get just a little bit of guidance that is going to push them along the way. And as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to things like this, I actually think this is fine because, I think it's good that we get new blood into the game. So long as they don't make the game suddenly mega easy, that's fine. Give them a little bit of guidance. Sure, whatever. Whenever you're at these Lost Grace checkpoints, you can summon the Firekeeper. The Firekeeper is called Melina, or I don't know exactly how they pronounce it. I'm just going to say Melina because this is the way that I typed it. And she enables you to level up, customize spirit summons, which is something that we'll talk about in a bit, as well as equipped skills, which again, I'm going to be going more in depth. I'm sorry. It's very hard to organize this information in a proper way. So this is how I did it. Now we have a quote here that Kitao told Eurogamer. And what he said was, whereas before these characters were generally reserved and quiet characters, Melina has got her own ambitions and her own big place in the story. So we hope you enjoy that aspect of it. So it seems like Melina is not just going to be your traditional, quiet, passive Firekeeper. she actually has like objectives that she wants to fulfill. So that will be an interesting thing to do, particularly when you take into account the thing that I said about story first, which, each character is going to move the plot forward. So who knows just how important Melina will eventually be to the story of the game. That's kind of cool. Besides these points of lost grace, there is also a hub location, like a central hub, almost like Elden Ring's version of Firelink Shrine. I don't know the exact name of this hub. We have a screenshot of it that I hopefully will remember to show at this point of the video, because most of the video is just going to be like screenshots and trailer footage. But we do have a picture of it. And this thing, the first thing that came to my mind when I looked at this is the Knights of the Round Table, Camelot, all of this stuff. Because you have this round table, bunch of chairs, which according to Vatividia, we will potentially see NPCs sitting there, although I think this was speculation on his part. But to me, it was just straight up, drawn out of Camelot. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comment section below. But it looks like this location is going to be your main hub, your Firelink Shrine, and whenever you meet NPCs out in the world, there's there's a high chance that they're going to end up over here. And then in here, I saw in an article somewhere, I don't remember the exact quote there, that you might see some, interactions with these NPCs with each other, not just with the player character, but these NPCs actually interacting with each other and furthering the plot that way. So I think that will be pretty cool. So now let's talk about the Spirit Steed. The Spirit Steed is going to be the horse that we've seen in the trailers. You're going to be able to summon it while you are moving. Vatividia emphasized that this looked extremely smooth, the way that you would just be able to go from running into riding the steed and back into running and all of that. There's dismount attacks like we've seen in one of the trailers. Whenever you are on the Spirit Steed, it is going to ignore your equipment load. This I was confirmed by Fextra Life. So you can just even if you're super heavy and you're fat rolling and all of that stuff, when you're on the steed, he's unaffected by any of that. Fextra Life also mentions that it seems like the Spirit Steed is focused on gameplay instead of authenticity. So instead of you having the shrinking horse's testicles whenever you are in the snow like you had in Red Dead Redemption 2, you're going to have a horse that is actually usable. I'm sorry, I had to put that one in there, because sometimes whenever you put too much authenticity into, we want the player to feel like they're actually riding a horse. Sometimes that authenticity actually gets into the way of you enjoying the game. And it seems like in this case, it's going to be more about, listen, this horse is for traversal. It is not to give you the feeling that you're actually riding a horse, basically. You will not be able to mount your Spirit Steed if you are engaging in multiplayer. So if you summon another player into your world, the two of you are going to be hoofing it. There is horseback combat. So basically, you can do melee attacks if you're on horseback. You can fire arrows. You can cast spells. You can do all kinds of stuff, which is cool. Because From Software has mentioned that you might prefer fighting on horseback against larger enemies for hit and run tactics, which I'll tell you what, I could have used that horse when I was fighting, who was it? Dark Eater Madir? I don't know, one of those bosses in the final DLC for Dark Souls 3. Basically, the dragon that every time I got close to him, he would fly literally across the map, and I spent the whole fight running towards him. I could have used the horse then, so I wouldn't have to run as much. But so they're saying you might prefer fighting on horseback against some of the larger enemies. And then you might want to dismount the dragon if you're fighting smaller enemies, because that might make it a little bit easier. So the horse is mostly going to be for hit and run type of tactics, according to what developers are saying. Now in the demo, like I said earlier, they fought a dragon, and at the end of that fight, they basically fought most of that dragon fight was on horseback, according to the descriptions that I was given in these articles and stuff. And at the very end, they finished off the dragon with a critical attack, which was basically they stabbed him in the eye with a spear. Now, an important thing about the horse and sprinting is that sprinting on the horse doesn't actually consume your character's stamina. These are two separate things. There's like a sprint gauge or something like that that enables you to, run. And this is very important because this allows you to sprint on horseback into a fight, dismount with an attack like we've seen in one of the trailers, and then just continue the fight without actually taking a stamina penalty because you sprinted into the fight. So that's a cool thing. So now let's talk about challenging zones and checkpoints. This was on The Verge, and they said, we have our existing corpse run system carried over from previous games, but we didn't want that to be a frustrating or stressful experience for the player to have to run all the way across the map to collect their experience points. So one thing we did was, in an area with a high level of challenge, we've placed these retry points, which is a tentative name, and if the player finds them, they'll have the option of when they die, they'll respawn from the retry point or the last checkpoint. So what does this actually mean? This means that for starters, it is confirmed that you still have the corpse run system. So whenever you die, you're going to drop your whatever resource it is they end up putting in the game. Right now, I believe that the name of that resource is runes. So you get runes, and then when you die, you drop those runes, and you use these runes to level up, and I'm assuming also buy items. I don't think anybody actually confirmed that you would use it to buy items, but we all know how these types of currencies usually work in Souls games. So, we have the traditional corpse run system, so if you die, you're expected to go back and pick it back up. If you die again, you lose everything, which to me, that is fine. But what they did is that in more challenging zones, they add some checkpoints that are not necessarily lost grace sites. And if you die in these more challenging zones, you're going to be able to more easily get your corpse back. Now, some players are going to look at this and they're dumbing it down. They're making it easier. But to be fair, from my memory of certain corpse runs that I've done, particularly in Dark Souls 2, they were just so long. Particularly, I don't remember which one was that boss. The boss with the big katana. Whatever. You guys probably remember the one that I'm talking about. I think it was in the Iron DLC or something. But that corpse run before that boss was garbage. I don't care what anybody else says. That corpse run was complete garbage. Just like the Frigid Outskirts, okay? Any corpse run in the Frigid Outskirts was complete garbage. As a matter of fact, the Frigid Outskirts were complete garbage, period. So it's like making it so that you don't have to constantly run 10 miles if you happen to die. I'm all for that. I've always been for having a checkpoint reasonably close to a boss, so that whenever you're making the boss run, you don't have to worry about anything. You just have to worry about, let me get to that boss so that I can master the boss. You want to master the boss, not the trash before the boss. So for me, this is a very, very, very good thing. Okay? The ability to skip a bunch of monsters and get to a boss fast is not a significant skill measurement as far as I'm concerned. Anyone can run fast and get to a boss. So I don't think this is a big deal. But, you guys let me know. And then another thing that they said, and this was in the Washington Post, is that there's going to be difficult optional encounters, which is a very good thing. So it's there's going to be those bosses off to the side that are not mandatory for the newcomers to this type of game. So they can still experience the story and all of this stuff. But we, the veterans, we can be like, oh yeah, there's that nasty boss over there that I can go and get. So this is a quote that was on the Washington Post. You will find some optional encounters that will definitely test the player's mettle, which we've prepared specifically for these players that love a challenge. And to me, very, very, very good thing. Now, an interesting thing that I wasn't really expecting is that Elden Ring is going to feature a crafting system. So, this was confirmed by Extra Life, again, because I'm trying to list out where I've gotten my details here. And the game is going to have a crafting system. You're going to be able to gather herbs as well as animal meat. And then you'll be able to use these to craft consumables. One of the examples mentioned was dried meat, which is going to give you stamina regen. You're also going to be able to craft different arrow types, potentially that sleep arrow that we talked about earlier. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see just how much we'll be able to craft. Maybe we'll also be able to craft stuff like pine resin, right? That was the name of it? The stuff that puts poison on your... No, pine resin was lightning. I forget. I'm sorry. You guys know that I have the memory of a goldfish, but you guys get the idea. Maybe we'll be able to craft the stuff that you can also use to enchant your weapons. That'll be interesting. I'm also curious as to whether or not some of this stuff will respawn in the overworld, because as we know, in most open world games, the resources will respawn. Is this something that we can expect in Souls as well, in Elden Ring? We'll see what that is going to be like. There's no confirmation of that in any of the articles that I've seen. Now let's focus a little bit on combat. Obviously, you're going to have the traditional playstyles that you know and love from Souls games. You have melee combat, archery, spell casting. You're going to be able to use swords, axes, pole arms, shields, you know, the catalysts, bows, probably crossbows as well, I would expect. All of those things. An interesting thing that people made a point to stress out is that 2 weapons are making a return from Dark Souls 2. Those weapons are the Twin Blades and the Lance. Now, I was never really a big fan of the Twin Blades. I don't know. I know that a lot of people love them. That's fine. You want to go all Darth Maul and Dark Souls, go for it. But the Lance, I love the Lance. The Lance is a really cool weapon, so I'm very curious to see what that is going to play like, particularly now that you have a horse. So you can basically just full on joust with your Lance. I think that will be very, very interesting. Now, in terms of combat, we still have critical attacks being a thing, so that means you're going to be able to do backstabs and parries and that kind of stuff. There's also the guard breaks, so if you're able to guard break an enemy, you're going to be able to perform a critical attack. I don't remember if this was a thing in 3. I think this was a thing in 3. It was definitely a thing in 2, right? But I know that Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, they played with this idea of breaking guards and, you know, stabbing enemies. Obviously, Bloodborne as well, whenever you deal enough damage to break or whenever you parry or whatever, you get to do your visceral attack. This is what you can expect from it. And obviously, Sekiro, of course. Sekiro also guard break. So you have those things coming back, and whenever you break an enemy's guard, it opens them up for you to do a riposte. There's also a new thing, which is you can perform counterattacks after blocking. And I love it. And I know that one of these lame articles called this the coward's parry. And I was like, shut the hell up. You shut the hell up, okay? Enjoyers of shields, like myself, we are going to enjoy this quite a bit. Although the example shown in the trailer is actually a dude blocking with a two-hander sword, so it's not necessarily just blocking with shields. Blocking with swords will also do it. But the idea behind this, according to Kitao, is to get players back into the action and not feel like blocking is just a penalty, which is good. Because previously, you know, in previous Souls games, you'd block and it's kind of like, oh, you lost a chunk of stamina and you're not really doing anything offensive. You can counter after you block, which is pretty cool. And it also makes things like great shields more viable. Because, like, realistically, most of us didn't really want it to use great shields because you would lose the ability to parry. Because just because I'm playing with a shield doesn't mean I don't want to parry, right? So with this, you'll be able to use a great shield and still perform counterattacks. At least that's what I would expect. So, you know, naturally, there's going to be stealth options like I've previously mentioned, which means you can sneak up on enemies, do backstabs, do that kind of stuff. There's the sleep arrows that we already talked about, which also enable you to put enemies to sleep and then either bypass the enemies completely or, you know, stab them in their sleep with a critical attack. I've already mentioned that there is a jump button. You'll be able to attack and shoot your bows mid-air. And finally, there are skills. Now, we've talked about these skills before. Now, if you guys remember Dark Souls 3 had skills that were called weapon arts and different weapons. One of my favorite ones was the axe weapon art. Was really good because your character would just like charge forward and it would kind of like bump into the enemies. It would do, I think it did a significant guard break damage. And then on top of it, at the end of the charge, you would bring the hammer down in a vertical strike. It was really, bring the axe down in a vertical strike. It was really, really very satisfying. This is what we're talking about, these types of weapon arts. And the interesting thing is that in Elden Ring, these are going to be able to be applied to different weapons, so they're not locked on a permanent weapon basis. So you actually just find the skill, and then you equip the skill over at the Place of Lost Grace. You can have Melina equip this skill for you, and then you can just use whatever weapon you want with whatever skill. We don't know if there's going to be restrictions on certain skills for certain weapons, like maybe you'll have skills that you can only use with an axe. Maybe you'll have skills that you can only use with spears, which I think would make sense. But maybe, you know, there's going to be skills that can be used with a wide variety of different weapons as well. So the examples that Vati Vidya brought up in his video was you can get wind blasts from a scimitar and a thunder strike from a polearm. So those are pretty cool. I think that thunder strike could be used with just about any weapon, right? If it's just a thunder strike type thing. But maybe wind blast would be something more that you would use with slashing weapons. So curved swords, straight swords, that kind of thing. I think that would make some sense, but you know, having no restrictions whatsoever would be even better, but we don't know if that is going to be a thing or not. Now, besides these skills, you're also going to be able to find spirits of the deceased. Now, these are summoning spells, and sometimes it's even about like you'll defeat a certain monster and you'll get his spirit or whatever that you'll be able to summon in different situations. You can't summon everywhere. You can only summon in certain difficult areas, which are marked by, there's an obelisk there, marking, I'm guessing that marks it as a difficult area or whatever, but you need that obelisk there if you want to be able to summon these spirits of the deceased. And once you summon them, it's going to eat at your FP, your mana system. And these summons can either be like you can summon up a tank, like an NPC that's going to try to tank for you, a tanky NPC. You can summon an NPC that's more of a damage dealer type. You can summon ranged NPCs that will shoot arrows or maybe cast spells. And you can even summon like a mob of NPCs, so like several NPCs that just create chaos. In this presentation, they specifically summoned this mob of spirits, which brought about 6 NPCs, and that caused a bunch of chaos that the players would be able to exploit. It's important to mention these summoning spells can only be used in single player, according to an information that I got over at Eurogamer. So that means that if you're co-oping with another player, no NPC summons. So I'm a little bit concerned as to how this is going to affect the difficulty. So I don't know how balanced this is going to be. There was even an article that said that potentially you would have to choose between putting stat points into your character or into these spirit NPCs. I'm not sure if that might be a mistranslation, but it doesn't really seem right. But I don't know. It feels kind of weird that you would level up NPCs as opposed to leveling up your own character. So I don't know if that's an actual system in the game, if that was a mistranslation, but there was an article that said that. So anyway, yeah, you'll be able to summon these. Keep in mind, you can't do it in multiplayer, and I am curious to see how these are going to affect the difficulty of the game. Are they going to make it a lot easier? Are they going to make it maybe even, you know, significantly broken in some situations? We don't know. This is going to be something that we can only test when the actual game comes out. But basically, these are going to be a great help for players that don't have Xbox Live, players that don't have PlayStation Plus, and they still find the game to be really hard. They'll be able to use these spirits without needing to interface with the multiplayer system. So that's something that you can do. Like I said, these do use the FP system that we had in Dark Souls 3, which is basically the mana system. And now we come to one of the things that I'm not particularly happy about, which is this was a question that was asked in an interview on a website called Ungeek. I'd never seen the website before, but they asked Kitao, regarding the FP, how will replenishing mana be handled? And the answer was, you may be familiar with Dark Souls, how it was there. You could allot your healing or your FP flasks to your tastes or build preference. This is still intact in Elden Ring. So what does this mean? Say, for instance, you have 10 flasks, right? You have your 10 flasks because you've played through the game and you've unlocked whatever systems it was that increased the amount of flasks that you could have. You could choose to have 7 healing flasks and 3 mana flasks. I was never a fan of this. I don't know exactly why, but there's just something about it that I don't like. I don't like having to put flasks, choosing between casting spells or having more heals. I don't like that being a thing. So I don't know exactly how they could handle it. I would actually prefer it if abilities or skills were more on a cooldown type system. I think that would be much more interesting. And, the more powerful the skill is, the bigger the cooldown will be. Because what ends up happening when you tie a permanent, and I say permanent between brackets, obviously between different lost grace checkpoints, right? Whenever they force you to choose between you want to have more healing or do you want to be able to use these abilities more, I think that 90% of the player base goes for additional healing because we want to be able to explore the game more, and, getting those mana flasks is going to contribute to you basically, I can use skills more often, but then you're always wondering, is this the enemy where I should be using my skills? Is there going to be a stronger enemy up ahead? I've never been a big fan of that, and what ended up causing, at least for me in Dark Souls 3, is that I would barely ever use the weapon arts. So they did this system which had amazing weapon arts, and then I think most players rarely ever use them, except maybe in PvP. So this was even something that there was a mod. I don't know if it was Cinder's mod or whatever it was. I kept hearing people talk about it, but there was a mod that even changed this so that you would use your weapon arts more frequently. And that's the way that I would like to see Elden Ring go. I want to actually use these more frequently, and I don't want to feel like I'm getting penalized with the healing stuff. Some of you guys might have a different opinion on that. Again, that's something that I'm curious to hear. Put it in the comment section below, but this is just my thoughts on this particular system. So then they showed some co-op in that gameplay. Looks like there's going to be a keyword system for groups, and this is very interesting because apparently what they're doing it is almost like guilds. So you could already do something like this in Souls where you put like a password and then your friends can join on your game through your password. But it looks like this time they're going a little bit further with it so that, for instance, you could have a group and everybody uses the same password. And when I say a group, you could have like, 20, 30 people, right? Everybody using the same password. And what's going to happen is it's going to populate the world with the asynchronous multiplayer elements of people using that password. So like, say for instance, we all use the password Ironbreakers, right? Whenever we start playing Elden Ring. If I was to die in a location, you guys would see my blood pool where I died because you're using the same password that I'm using. So it's not just about the co-op. It's about also I'm assuming there's a message system. I don't think I've seen that referenced anywhere. But, all those asynchronous elements that we've come to know and love from Souls games, those are going to be present based on which password you put for your group. According to Vati, it seems that this isn't going to be as instanced as previous Souls games. And I really do hope that is the case. From Software is looking to reduce the barrier of entry for co-op. This is something that they've said. And, like the fact that you don't need humanities in order to be able to summon other players. And this is something that I've kind of always wanted for the Souls games, because I feel like the co-op in a Souls game is pretty unique, but there's also the thing where, you do co-op with a friend and then you guys go and you finish a zone and then your friend goes away. You can't play the game beginning to end with a friend. You have to constantly be summoning, resummoning, and all of this stuff. And we already know that there's going to be a similar summoning system like the soapstones and stuff like that. You're going to put your sign down, people are going to summon you. I'm just hoping that you get to keep playing. Like, let players rest at lost grace sites, which we don't know if that can be done or not. Let players continuously progress and play through the whole game together. Like, I don't think this is a big deal. Like, we've done it. I've personally done it with 2 friends. The thing is, it's not the best of experience because, like, first you go through the game with 1 player, then you go through the game and with another player. You basically have to do everything 3 times if you're playing with 3 players, which, you have to do every single area of the game 3 times. It's not the most exciting thing. I mean, I've even done full playthroughs in the channel here with me and Pally Time. A lot of you guys seem to remember and enjoy those, so that's a good thing, right? But yeah, I would like to see them enable that type of stuff. Vati Vidya did mention that after defeating the field boss, which was done in co-op, the co-op player didn't disappear. It is also important to mention that the maximum number of summons that you can have is 2. So you can only summon 2 additional players into your world. And I'm assuming they're saving that last spot of the 4 players for an invader to come along and try to wreck your day. And speaking of invaders, let's talk about something else that I was not a fan of at all. Let's talk about PvP in Elden Ring. You won't be able to invade solo players. It's important to mention that this is something that can change. This is something where, From Software is still looking for feedback from the community. But you will not, as it is right now, you will not be able to invade solo players. So if somebody's playing solo, you can't invade them at all. So there won't be the thing where some people might be wondering, oh, what about if someone is riding a horse? Can you ride a horse with someone? No, you can't even invade someone who's riding a horse because someone who's riding a horse is playing by themselves because you can't summon a horse if you're doing co-op. So what this means is that invaders can only invade players who are co-oping. There's also a duel item, kind of like the red soapstone, I would imagine. So like if you're solo and you want to do duels, you can put down a red soapstone and someone can summon you and you can do duels that way. But if you're just trying to actually invade, then yeah, you're going to be invading into a player that is co-oping with someone else. Now, I think this is a terrible idea because it's just one of the core designs of Souls games. Like, the reason I play online, the reason I personally like to play online is that thrill that I can be invaded at any moment. There's just a thrill to it, which is cool. Like, you're progressing, then suddenly somebody invades you, and it creates interesting situations where, you can just get completely wasted, right? Somebody can invade you. They can be way more powerful than you. They can have a build that they've done specifically to be super effective at a certain level range and beat the crap out of you. But it still feels interesting to have that looming danger where you can invade. And it makes it so much more rewarding when you're able to actually repel the invader himself. Like those have created incredible memories for me when I was playing through the game. And I know that there's a lot of players that do not like the invading mechanics. They're just like, oh, it's griefing, it's this and that and the other. And sure, I think there should be an option for you to opt out of it. And I actually liked an idea that I saw in Fextra Life's video where he was saying that if someone invades you, if you want to turn off invasions, you need to at least be invaded once. So that you at least experience once. It's that old thing of like, how can you say you don't like this food? You never tried it. So, well, it looks bad. I don't want to try it. But then if you tried, maybe like, you know what, this looks bad, but it's actually pretty good. It's like a lot of people won't even try PvP. They won't even try it. So I think that would actually be a great idea. It would be like, you're opted into PvP from the get-go if you're playing online. And after you get invaded once, you can turn it off. Or maybe invaded 2 or 3 times, whatever. But after you get invaded a certain amount of times, then you can turn it off. And you would be up to be invaded from the beginning. And I think that this is something that should be done even when you are solo. The problem is obviously with the whole horse thing. How are you going to deal with the horse? Because obviously they don't want to deal with the horse in multiplayer. From Software, I mean. They don't want to be dealing with the horse in multiplayer. And I can understand that because that just creates a completely additional layer. And one of the things that From Software is pretty good about doing is like, we know that we can make these things work. We know we can't make these things work, so we're not even going to try. So for them to just be like, hey, listen, the horse, it's really cool, but we're not even going to try to make this work in multiplayer, so whatever. So they understand their limitations, and they're not going to try and reach things that they already know they're probably not going to be able to, to make an enjoyable experience. I don't know how to fix the horse situation, because obviously you don't want to be like, someone invaded you, you've been dismounted. Like, I think that is also pretty much a game-breaking thing. But I think what should potentially happen is you're able to invade solo players, and once the invasion begins, the player is not able to ride the horse. If the player is riding the horse, then you can't invade. But if the player is not riding the horse, then you can invade, and at that point, the player can't ride the horse. Like, say that, oh, there's something from the tree that is preventing you from summoning. Like, your connection to the spirit steed's been severed temporarily. Like, say, whatever the item that the invader uses severs your connection to the horse, and now you can't mount for a little bit, and you can still be invaded solo. And obviously, there's, like, cooldown mechanics to this. It's not like people are going to be chain invaded, right? People weren't chain invaded in Souls. You'd get invaded once, and then you'd go about your business, because there's, like, a cooldown to you being invaded again. So I don't really see this as a problem, particularly for players like me that enjoy the odd invasion. Even if I do get thrashed, like I'm not going to sit here and say, oh man, I'm amazing at PvP and Souls, just you wait. No, I don't even take Souls PvP seriously, but I still like the fact that it's there. And I like the mechanic that some players are able to invade my game and come harass me. I think that's an interesting mechanic to the game. And you know, if you get invaded like 1 or 3 times, something like that, then you'd be able to go ahead and turn it off if you didn't like it. I think that would be a much better way of doing it than just be like, no, invaders have to invade into co-oping, because it's basically going to transform PvP into a gank fest that I don't think is going to be interesting, unless the invaders get a significant advantage for invading a co-op world. But even still, I would still want there to be solo invasions. But with that, that is all of the information that I was able to get from Elden Ring. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this video. It took me a long time to make, and I know that I'm extremely late to the party. If you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to hit up with a like, because that helps out a lot. I will be covering as much of Elden Ring as possible here on the channel, because, as you guys know, I'm a huge Souls fan. And in terms of the way that I'm going to be covering the game when it comes out, I plan on streaming my first playthrough, my first blind playthrough of Elden Ring, but I plan on doing it in a different way than I usually stream. So I'm going to be streaming it here in this channel, and the difference that I'm going to bring is that I will not look at chat. So you guys get to watch me live. I will set up a password so that if you want to invade me while we're live, if you want to do nasty stuff to me while we're live, you'll be able to do so. But like I said, I will not look at chat, because I've been spoiled before on certain games, and in certain games I'm willing to take that chance. I am not going to take that chance with Elden Ring. I'm going to be taking my time going through this game. So if you're someone that is looking for like a walkthrough the moment I get into the game, you're in the wrong place, because I'm going to be playing the game blind whenever the embargo lifts. I'll be doing it live so that you can invade me live and interact with me while I'm playing the game, if you're someone who's also going to be playing the game at the same time. And I just will not be looking at chat to prevent getting spoiled on stuff. So I hope you guys can understand that. Let me know what you guys think about that plan as well. And again, I'm sorry, I know that this is a long video. We're almost coming up on an hour, so I'm just going to cut it here. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.